This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Warning! The following podcast contains adult language, adult content, weird and unusual stories that all happen to be true. We didn't start this war on safety, but we're going to fight that safety war and we're going to win it. Emergency response today on Safety Wars. This is going to be a quick episode here. This past week, I was listening to Todd Conklin on his podcast, the Pre-Accident Investigation, where he discussed a situation on a plane in Atlantic City where an airplane was struck by a bird, had a bird strike, had to land, and they had to get everybody off the plane. This is where the response fell apart. Nobody, and there's YouTube video, or I should say very few, listened to the flight attendants there and were in a panic because the plane was on fire. One of the engines was on fire and they were not evacuating the plane because it was not safe to evacuate the plane. It would have caused a potentially bigger problem. So they would have went from a situation where nobody was hurt to a situation where we had a lot of potential injuries. And the pilot and co-pilot decided not to evacuate the plane immediately, let the emergency crews get there, put out the fire, and also they would have people there who would be able to assist in the evacuation and managing that whole situation. And this makes me think of, and I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago, where we had a guy on the job who was in an area, he was at a facility where the process that he was working around was on fire. Fire alarm went off and everything else, and I told the guy, hey, why don't you... I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to leave the area, go to a safe place, and notify the emergency responders who are already on their way that there is a man in there that refuses to leave. And this is his last known location inside this process unit. You know, I don't know, the guy had in his head that he was not going to listen to safety no matter what, or the emergency managers no matter what, unless it was somebody with a fire hat on. Even though there were flames about 75 foot away from him, which he saw, and everything else, I don't know what to say about that. So you're, as an emergency manager, you're in a tough situation. What do? You have to guarantee you're safe, but on the other hand, are you going to go rushing into a situation? I'm not a trained firefighter. I don't have the proper equipment with me, or anything else. So what are you left to do? So I made the choice, go to a safe area, notify the emergency responders there's a man in there that refuses to leave, and they looked at me like I was crazy until they found out who it was. And then about an hour later, he says, how come you left me there with the thing burning? I said, I told you to leave, you refused to leave. And by the way, I didn't leave you there. I notified the emergency responders where you were after I was in a safe location. I don't know, you gotta really address it in your head, why you don't listen to emergency responders, emergency managers, alarms, things of that nature. Later on, his boss had a very serious conversation with him, and he was eventually demoted from his position within the organization, and that was it. He couldn't be trusted because he refused to follow emergency procedures when it was an imminent danger to him and his coworkers. And he refused to listen to anybody after that. This was this was one hell of a time to find out. At least the management found out or realized they had a problem. And they ignored all the leading indicators that went into this because there was an ongoing issue with this employee for many years. Unfortunately, they had to find out in this situation, but fortunately, nobody was hurt in this situation either. As an emergency manager, what do you do here? You have to train for these things. It's more than just going out there with a piece of paper saying, when you are told to evacuate, you must evacuate, and when you hear an emergency alarm, you gotta evacuate. That does you no good, that piece of paper, in the middle of an emergency. I'm to recommend everybody does if they're faced with this in your workplace. No, I'm not the only one that this happens to. You have to go and do training with everybody. You also have to vet your employees prior to hiring them. Do they have a situation where they're against authority? You think that, hey, during an emergency drill, they're not going to listen to anybody. During an actual emergency, they're not going to do anything. This is why it's important that you train and you have emergency drills to find out where there are weaknesses in the system and maybe counsel employees like this, or maybe if an employee just has it in them where I'm not going to listen to anybody and the heck with them, the hell with everybody, it's not a good fit for your job. I was talking to a fire chief in northern New Jersey who had a fire in a high-rise. The high-rise for North Jersey, no, this was around 15 floors. And fire alarms are going off. Building has smoke in it. Majority of workers from one company refused to evacuate. They were just sitting there. I don't know, what do you do? That was what the corporate culture was. That unless there are flames coming at you from the door, and you can see those flames, you're in immediate danger. I don't know, burning building is immediate danger to me, but this company was told, do not leave your desk or you're fired. When they went and eventually did the investigation. Now, do you work in an organization like that? I don't know. Do you work in an organization where the safety professionals and emergency managers are looked upon as fools and idiots? Or do you have that organization? Because if you're in that, you're going to have a problem when there is an emergency. It's going to be worse. No one's going to listen to you. Number one. Number two, when the dust clears and everything is done, well, our safety guy didn't do X, Y, and Z. Our safety professional is worthless. They did nothing. Well, maybe they weren't listened to. You have to be able to identify these situations well in advance, is my point, and before they happen, so maybe you can manage them. And guess what? I'm going to tell you how to... No, jobs? No, people have a hard time getting jobs in the safety field. If you're working in an organization where you're not valued, nobody wants you there, they're not going to listen to you in an emergency, and you're basically the fall person, the person that everybody is going to blame, and you have all the responsibility for managing emergencies, right? Some organizations are like that. You have all the responsibility, but you have none of the authority to manage them. You really got to question whether or not you're going to be there or not, if that's an organization you want to be affiliated with. Because you're going to be caught in the crossfire of the safety war. For Safety Wars, this is Jim Posel.